Next up, we have another group. So just to let everybody know, we have 5 groups here, so obviously we're a little bit pressed for time. We knew it was going to run over, but I don't think we expected to be over by an hour already at this time. So I just would ask everybody to please respect the speakers, which I think we've done a pretty good job at. Let them speak, and anyone who's testifying up here, just please keep your comments as brief as possible. Next, again, we have group 2 is the school administrators, and we have a representative from the Cayuga County Chamber and also a representative from SUNY. Again, thank you. I'm just going to let you each, if you would, introduce yourselves and then give some testimony, and then we'll let everybody go, and then we'll ask questions again at the end, kind of like we did in the last panel. So Mary Beth, if you want to start.
Good evening. My name is Mary Beth Warren, and I thank you for this opportunity to come and speak with you this evening. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction at Mexico Academy and Central Schools. I've been an educator in this district for 26 years, and I spent the first half of my career as a middle school special education teacher. So I bring a broad perspective to the issues that you asked us to speak about today. Specifically, my concerns will address the challenges that we have faced in light of the implementation of both the Common Core and the assessments that are now part of our teachers' evaluations. Let me just start by saying that I am in favor of rigorous learning standards that challenge our students to think creatively and solve complex problems. And inherent in that process should also be the ability to read complex text and to communicate effectively, both orally and in writing. And I believe that the Common Core learning standards do an adequate job of addressing those expectations and standards. I'm also in favor of assessments that measure our students' progress toward mastering learning standards. But my concerns relate to the manner in which the Common Core learning standards and related assessments are being used to evaluate our teachers. Perhaps you have heard that analogy, and I know Bob mentioned it earlier, that involves educators flying the airplane while it's being built. And sadly, this is quite accurate. In fact, if you consider flying a partially built airplane, there is one thing that you can be sure of, and that it will crash. And in my opinion, the newly implemented practice of using a brand new set of standards, along with a brand new slate of high-stakes tests to evaluate the skills of our teachers, is also doomed to crash. It is simply unethical to judge our teachers in this manner. Our teachers, and I'm going to assume the teachers across the state, are working extremely hard at making sense of the new standards and the new assessments. I can't tell you the number of teachers that, even with 20 years of classroom experience, tell me they feel like first-year teachers. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, many also tell me they're seeing our students rise to the challenge. But why phase in everything all at once? Why base teachers' evaluations on something that is still unknown and unproven? And of course, we know the answer. It's not grounded in research. The answer isn't grounded in sound instructional practice. It's not grounded in the educational realm. Rather, the answer is found in the political realm. When you ask us the question, what can be implemented to improve the transition to the new curriculum, I beg you to please continue to reach out to the educational community and ask for solutions. But don't waste our time unless you're going to take our answers seriously and allow them to make an impact on future policy decisions. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Andrew Fish. I'm the Executive Director for the Cayuga County Chamber of Commerce and the Cayuga Economic Development Agency. And I also sit on the Central New York Regional Economic Development Council. going to change things up a little bit here, because obviously I'm not coming at this perspective from the perspective of an educator, even though I did work in private education for 7 years before taking my current role. What I'm going to say to you is this, is that while I do not understand all of the expectations that are there in the Common Core, and I have not looked at every standard that's being set, I will say that there is a problem with our current education system. There is a problem with how we are preparing our young people both for career readiness and for college readiness. And that problem manifests itself in the fact that when I talk to companies throughout Central New York, they can't find people to work with them. We have an unemployment issue in Central New York, but we have a lot of jobs that are unfilled right now. And when I talk to these employers, the issue is they aren't coming out prepared from high school to get into the workforce, and oftentimes they're not even coming out of college prepared into the workforce. And the issue comes down to math and science and work ethic. And those are the main things that they're having trouble with. I have a company who in the last year and a half has added over 100 jobs and is looking to add another 20. They told me they had to actually hire over 200 people in order to weed through to get to those 100 people that could actually stay there. That's a problem. And while I'm not here to tell you whether you should or shouldn't repeal the Common Core, obviously there's an issue with implementation. I hear that from my friends who are teachers, my wife who works in the school districts, and I hear that there are some challenges with this, obviously, as well as a rollout of the APPR. But if you should choose to stop this process, I hope that you have something ready to go quickly, because the reality of it is, even if you choose to phase this in over the period of the next 5 years, you will have 5 years where we have to solve this problem. And the thing about business and industry is they will find a way to solve that problem and find workers. The challenge will be is that they will not find them here, and likely they will follow the workforce wherever that workforce is. So whatever decisions you make, I encourage you to keep that in mind, because the purpose of our education is not a piece of paper. The purpose of our education is not a pat on the back for our students. The purpose of our education is to make them successful in their life and make them ready for the opportunities that they face when they get out into the world, whether that's the world of higher education or the world of the workforce. And right now, we are not doing it. I believe the Common Core has the potential to do that, but it needs to be done well and in the right time frame. And I just ask that whatever you do moving forward, you keep that in mind. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Docteur, Director of Curriculum and Staff Development for the Cayuga and Bowden. Thank you for having me here tonight. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said by our panelists thus far. I think everyone has articulated the support for the Common Core in as much as the agreement to raise standards for our students. However, the implementation issues that we have encountered have certainly been numerous. In addition to being a professional in the educational sector, I'm a mother of a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. My 7-year-old now comes home from 2nd grade telling me that she's a mathematician and she loves math, and she's teaching my 3-year-old math. So for that reason, as a mother, I support what's happening in schools as in my role as a professional development provider and someone who oversees that work in districts with teachers. I can tell you that teachers are working far beyond overtime, trying to dig into this and make instructional lesson plans that are meaningful for their students. So, Assemblyman Barkley, you asked for suggestions of what you all could do in terms of supporting that, and I can tell you that one limitation that we face in our line of work and working in districts is the never-ending battle with time, which is certainly not distinct from the limitations with funding. So we have districts who simply say we cannot send our teachers to professional development because we simply don't have the money to do that. Similarly, other districts like Michelle Brantner shared in Moravia, she has made a priority in her district to provide release time for her teachers very regularly throughout the school year. That's something that she has decided to do as the leader, and I think her teachers, if they were here, would as they have shared with me, said that they find that they appreciate that support. We have other districts, however, who, the teachers have essentially been left to their own devices to download the 250-plus page module and work it out, essentially. And any teacher, I think, will tell you that the time involved to do that is more than exists. So, from your perspective, I think the funding piece to support and invest in professional development, as the superintendents on the previous panel suggested, is indescribable in terms of its importance in getting this significant lift off the ground. So if I were to leave you with one word, it would be that, to help support districts financially so that they can support their teachers with the time that is necessary to do the work to implement these standards. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Miller. I taught social studies for the Syracuse City School District for 32 years, the last 20 years at Cortland High School. And since 2004, I've been a lecturer at the History Department at SUNY Cortland, and I teach students who wish to become social studies teachers and supervise student teachers. I want to commend you who came here and took the initiative to hold this forum, and especially Bill Magnarelli, who's helped me, kept after Commissioner King to get information on Pearson's contracts with NYSERD. The current PBS circuit being written by Commissioner King and staff is not useful. I tried for that last week, and certainly not public television. How many people here know NTPA? The expression NTPA? A few. NTPA is already required of teacher candidates seeking certification this year. NTPA is the Educational Teacher Performance Assessment sold to NYSED by Pearson Publishing. Pearson Publishing is a $9 billion multinational company that has a $32 million 5-year contract for all the exams that brought most of you here tonight. NTPA is a new teacher certification process for all teacher candidates in New York State. It was developed by part of Stanford University, but is entirely administered and scored by Pearson. Pearson will be the sole determiner of which teacher candidates receive certification and which ones will not. A British-based multinational will thus choose the next generation of teachers for our K-12 classrooms. Pearson lobbyists helped convince NYSED that our certification programs needed reforming. They saw our federal race as the top cash cow and wanted in. Various parties claim we graduate too many teachers and thus the bar must be raised. The fact is that our teacher candidates and graduates are in demand in 49 other states and many nations, and that 67 to 80% of the school districts that attend our annual teacher recruitment days, there are 3 or 4 of them across the state every spring, are from outside New York State. I speak with principals, especially in the South, and they're thrilled to get our teachers. If NYSED was so worried about the surplus teachers, why did they approve a teacher ed program at Casanova College in the past decade? Or why do they allow diplomas from University of Phoenix and other online diploma mills? Historically, teacher candidates have had to pass New York State accredited college education programs and then pass several certification exams. I have no qualms about the state updating those exams. I do have concerns that the commercial behemoth, Pearson, has complete control over the process and the cost. The Pearson NTPA initiative is an expensive new proposition for teacher candidates, and it didn't surface in their educational career path until 2013. Fingerprinting $95 has always been the norm. This year, however, the teacher candidate must now pay between $100 and $150, still only estimated by Pearson, for each of up to 5 certification exams, now only computer-based and much more expensive than the $88 exams before NTPA. The most concerning aspect of the NTPA process is the portfolio and the videotaping component, which will cost the teacher candidate $300 to $350 per submission. During their student teaching experiences in your schools, candidates must videotape themselves in 2 separate 10-minute uncut videos. These are then uploaded to Pearson and accessed by Pearson's employees for both review and training purposes. A Pearson reviewer receives $75 to evaluate the video clips and an electronic portfolio of the lessons and determines if the teacher candidate is worthy of certification. Pearson estimates it will take a reviewer 2 hours to review the 80 to 100 pages of text and video and then determine the candidate's fate. Detailed feedback must come from the college faculty only after Pearson has scored the portfolio. Pearson is happy just to receive the $350. The Pearson employee is remote and anonymous. He or she could be in Miami or Mumbai. Reviewers need not have experience in the type of classroom they are evaluating. The teacher candidate must handle all aspects of the videotaping, including the equipment. iPads at $600 plus or minus are suggested. iPads also happen to be made by Apple, which is working diligently with Pearson to provide the tech for Pearson's burgeoning e-learning goodies. So the cost to each teacher candidate will be in the $1,000 to $1,500 range, plus the cost of video technology. As parents, do you wish to have your children's imagery uploaded into the cloud and stored by Pearson to be accessed by its employees? Pearson instructs the teacher candidate to circulate permission slips ahead of the class to be filmed. Pearson's model forms have been adapted by some universities. Now, how is this form to be worded for families whose language is not English? For those students who don't wish to be filmed, quote, the classroom and filming angle may be set up to exclude the students from the video without excluding them from the instruction. Why is remote evaluation by private contractors of video of lessons necessary? I guarantee you that the current screening process for teachers is already intensive and extensive. College supervisors who know the schools and their needs evaluate the K-12 teacher candidates. From Google searches to multiple interviews, candidates are carefully screened by school boards. The majority of school districts already require finalists to teach real lessons in front of groups of students ahead of hiring decisions being made. Thus, the video aspect is redundant and merely a Pearson involvement. School districts are not the ones seeking certification reform. Some folks have suggested that New York State should have examinations similar to bar exam for lawyers. Actually, there's a process already in place called National Board Certification. Pearson and its foundation are currently under investigation for undue influence via trips to London, Helsinki, Rio, and Singapore for educational leaders in states with whom they have contracts. The $55 million in contracts Pearson currently has with NYSET, however, pale in comparison to the $500 million Pearson has sold to the state of Texas. Even at this point in November, some teacher candidates have been unable to submit their NTPA portfolios because Pearson lacks scorers. The cutoff score, the level at which teacher candidate videos and portfolio are deemed to be passing, have yet to be announced, although they were supposed to be available last summer. In a number of other ways, the NTPA is not ready for use, similar to the issues surrounding Common Core implementation. Our students at SUNY Cortland have taken a stand to have NTPA postponed until the weaknesses are dealt with. The rush for NYSET to get the race to the top money and then implement the grant requirements reminds me of the issues with the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Unintended consequences lurk, including technological issues. I recommend that you read Alan Singer's pieces in the Huffington Post. He's an Oxford professor who writes a lot about the dangers of corporate intrusions into the American education system. I provided a paper he presented in the folder so you gentlemen will be receiving. I also encourage the whole audience to sign the NTPA petition found under education at change.org. This was begun by our students. I ask that we stand up to NYSET and have them slow down the pace for both Common Core implementation, the obsession with standardized testing, and NTPA. Thank you.
Thank you. Because my colleague Ed Rod didn't get a chance to ask questions at the last panel. Ed, you have some questions for this panel?
Sure. I just wanted to actually go back to something Jessica had mentioned in terms of the use of the modules and all of that. I mean, I certainly would, and I don't know if you disagree with me on this, say that any of the successes we've had despite the uneven implementation of this have been, like you said, through the dedication and hard work of our teachers who are going above and beyond to keep up with all this. I was wondering if you could, as a curriculum chair and somebody dealing with staff development, elaborate on the different ways in which teachers have had to go about this, given the availability of modules in some areas and other areas, and obviously they're becoming more and more available, but like many of our previous panelists said, not available in for any length of time enough to allow adequate preparation before somebody's actually going to teach one of the modules.
Sure. So I think it looks very different in different districts. I can say that in every district, everyone is, for lack of a better word, suffering from what you're saying, which is the lack of availability of the modules that are out. So they're not coming out in timely enough fashion for people to adequately prepare, generally speaking. Any teacher that I have spoken with on a personal level basically tells me that they're up every night, all night, preparing for sometimes the next day's lesson, sometimes the next week's lesson, depending on how far in front of it they can get. In some of our districts, our staff development team is embedded in districts. It's a little bit of a different model than happens in some other regions of the state. So our professional learning coaches that are assigned to districts literally are bringing with them whatever we can get from Albany, just-in-time basis. And we have not run into a case yet where someone is literally saying to us, okay, I'm out of the module materials, what do I do? Because in every case, while that might actually be true, teachers basically are not going to go without a lesson plan, and so they use the resources and materials that they have. They collaborate with their colleagues to be prepared. But it's definitely not an ideal situation from a preparation standpoint. Does that answer your question?
It does definitely, because people know, like you mentioned, if there's something not available, they're going to collaborate with their colleagues and discuss, how they're teaching something. And really, with an overhaul like this, that would, I think, really be the ideal way of going about this. The modules should be, I think one of our previous panelists mentioned, meant to be a best practice type model. And when there's such a scarcity of resources and other things, something that should be kind of a guide that somebody can work with, I think becomes a crutch to fall back on because there's just not adequate time for preparation. And I think that's part of the issue we're seeing here, that if the resources were there and the time was there for districts to collaborate, both within districts and amongst districts regionally and statewide, I think we might be seeing better product being put out, whether it's through state ed or through any other avenue.
I would agree with that. The other thing I would say is, having just come from Albany last week, an SED person who was speaking to the group basically said that, successful reform will only come through collaboration and support. And so the collaboration obviously is a critical piece. When in terms of the modules or not, I think what we are encouraging districts to do is when the modules aren't available, the thing that we all have in common, I think Assemblyman Barkley asked the question, are all of you implementing the modules or not? The thing that we all across the state have in common are the standards. And so, module or no module, we do, as for example, third grade teachers have the third grade standards that we know those are the things that we need to help teach our kids, independent of the module. The modules, as you said, are a resource to get to that point.
Okay. Now, you've talked to the teachers about the curriculum, and have they found a lot of the ELAs and the modules are age appropriate, or they're developmentally appropriate?
I think it kind of goes back to your ancient Mesopotamia conversation that you had with the previous panel. So some teachers feel that there are pieces of the modules that are not age appropriate. And so it's really very much a reiteration of what Michelle shared with you, that the original message that SED put out was the modules are intended to be implemented with fidelity, and now the language is kind of softening to be with integrity. And so in our department, what we're encouraging people to do is honor the standard, honor the rigor. How you get there is you have to use your teacher discretion, thousands of decisions you make every day as a teacher to deliver that. Absolutely, I have had people say to me, are you kidding me? We're thinking that my second graders are going to do X? Absolutely.
So you're taking the time to go through and just get rid of the stuff that's just nonsense. Is that what you're saying?
What we're finding is in districts that were really, who in September would have said, we are implementing the modules. We are adopting. The language that SED first came out with was, you can adopt the modules, adapt the modules, or ignore the modules. So we basically approach that in our region as you can adopt them, adapt them, or refer to them. Because even if you're going to not implement them, at least breezing over them to kind of see how it compares to your current curriculum seems like a good course of action. So even with the districts who were full throttle adopting, they have found that they have to adapt because every group of students is different. Every group of students in a building, in a district, they're all different. So the adaptations are unavoidable.
Right. So what I'm thinking is, like, they're closing the barn door after the boss already left. If they would have got teachers' input on the modules, we could have avoided it. Would you agree with that?
I could agree with that.
Okay.
You know, I'm not one of the vendor developers, so I can't really speak to the process of the module development, but I can say, I feel like I can speak for the many teachers that I work with who would say, yeah, I kind of wish they asked me, and I could have told them that that was not going to work for my group of students.
Okay. Now, with inclusive classrooms, so you have kids with disabilities, learning disabilities, that are being put into the classrooms, okay? The Common Core and the way the tests and everything, they have to be tested on this, no matter what their IEP is or anything else, okay? Aren't we doing these children a disservice?
Again, I think it goes back to, we have a body of standards that we want to hold students accountable for the standards at a developmentally appropriate level. So, in terms of the module specifically, I think the general consensus from the people who I work with, I'll speak just from that group, there's fairly insufficient modifications in the modules to address multiple learning styles, multiple levels of students. So that does go back to that whole teacher piece, using the teacher decisions. Teachers have been teaching students with multiple, with varying ability levels forever. So teachers still need to rely on that in order to get students to meet their developmentally appropriate levels.
Okay, now I have other teachers that are coming in and talking to us at these forums. And what's happening, especially the math modules. I mean, fifth graders, they have doing algebra. Okay, we actually have a colleague that teaches college level math. And he's looking at some of the fifth grade modules, okay, on math, and saying, I don't even know what the hell they're talking about here. So, I mean, that goes back to the appropriate, but that leads me to another question. Do you have school districts that are low income? Okay. Now, and I have a lot of parents that are struggling right now when their kids are coming home with this homework, especially the handouts, okay? These kids are there till 10 o'clock at night doing homework. Then they're expected to get up at 6 o'clock and come in all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning. Now, the parents that are helping their kids can help their kids, or the parents that don't understand it are paying for tutors. And in my case, either I help my child, or if I didn't understand it, I'd get a tutor. But there are some households where you have a single-parent household, okay? And their biggest fight is to keep a roof over their head, keep food on the table, and the lights on, okay? And they're not able to do this. They're not able to get these resources. So now what we're putting together with the Common Core curriculum and everything else, there's going to be a wider gap for these kids. Would you agree with that?
What I would say is, yes, we have districts with high poverty levels in our region, and I'm thinking to a very recent chief school officers meeting, or meeting of our superintendents, where the superintendents were sort of troubleshooting with each other. How are you approaching this issue that you're talking about? Kids being up, parents calling and saying, okay, my kid is like, I can't help them with the homework, the student is up all hours of the night with the homework, and basically, again, it has to go back to what do we know is good for kids? We know that having a student stay up till 10 o'clock stressing out about homework and coming in not bright-eyed when she tells the next morning is not good for students. So what do? We have to give teachers, as Michelle said, permission to say, if I know my students are leaving unable to do the homework, I don't give them the homework. We work on the homework the next day together. So it's that whole, it's getting away from thinking of the module as the script and giving the teachers permission to say, just because it says homework or exit ticket, you can modify that, given what you know your students are able to do right now.
Okay, what we're hearing in the forums, that's an exception, not the rule.
I think that's also very new because of that whole, the initial message of implement the model with fidelity, and now it's, well, with integrity, because you have to use your teacher discretion. And I think that's a shift in message from SED in the fairly recent past.
Right. Let me skip issues here. Andrew, you're talking about the jobs and stuff that are out there. A lot of these jobs that you're talking about, are they by any chance in the trades?
It's both. It's in the trades and it's in manufacturing, and it's also in other areas, healthcare and different areas. It requires all levels of education. Yes, there are trades, but it's also engineers. It's also nurses aides and nurses. It's across the board where they're just having a hard time filling jobs.
Okay. And and see if you agree with this statement, okay? What happened, one of the things we've been talking about is with all the cuts to the schools, what's taking a big hit is the BOCES programs. And the other thing that we're looking at is we require all these kids to get Regents diplomas. And as much as we want all our kids to be nuclear physicists, that's not the reality. When I went to school, we had wood shops, we had electrical shops, we had metal shops, we had, my sister-in-law graduated with her LPN. Okay, she's been working ever since. And the bottom line, we also had, kids had options between a general diploma and a Regents diploma, a career track and an education track. Now, personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with being an electrician. Have you paid one lately? Right. So, I mean, would you agree that some of our problems in filling these positions is that we've been cutting back on programs for the trades?
I think the issue, and again, I'm going to approach this from the standpoint that I'm not a professional educator working within the system, so I want to make that caveat, but the issue is that we've cut back on the things that those type of programs taught. Not the skills themselves, but the ability to understand technical information, the ability to do some of that critical thinking outside of I'm reading this and wanting to respond to how my opinion is on it. No, I'm reading this so that I can find these facts that I need to find. Those programs taught some of that basic information as well in a completely different way. When you were going through shop, you learned math, you learned right angles, you learned about all those things that you needed to know that when you got into the workforce that you had. We've done away with a lot of that, not just because those programs went away, but because we don't have that standard right now throughout. One of the biggest vacuums that we have in the workforce right now, specifically in Cayuga County, is plumbing. Huge vacuum right now. But you know what the issue is? It has nothing to do with whether or not they've learned how to turn a wrench or anything. They don't show up. And when they do show up, they don't know how to read the manual. And when they do show up and they know how to read the manual, they can't do the basic math that they need to do in order to be able to calculate the length of pipe that they need to install. Those are the issues that this guy is telling me. He's in multiple states. He's from our community. He wants to come here and he wants to add tens and tens and tens and possibly hundreds of jobs and develop a new organization to do this. He can't find 5 guys that meet that requirement, and he's advertising everywhere because they're not coming out of our systems ready for that kind of activity.
Right. Well, all I can tell you, I do have one school in my district. There's one course and it's packed every time, people waiting to get in, where they actually build a house, a modular house every year. And then what they do is they sell the house in order to fund the program. But what I've seen is a drastic cut in BOCES. No fault to the schools, okay, but that's the first thing that really they go after, is the BOCES programs because they can be expensive. But, I mean, when you're talking about jobs and stuff, look, there are kids out there, there's all levels of intelligence, okay? And some people can work with their hands. Other people can read a book and regurgitate what the book said, but they don't know which end of the screwdriver to use. So I think that we're getting away from that well-rounded education where we can actually let kids go into the trades also.
And I'll say this, our BOCES, we actually have businesses going in and recruiting kids trying to pull them out in their junior year. So we have a great resource in our BOCES. But I think the bigger reiteration comes back to the third thing that I mentioned, the math, the science, and the work ethic. Right now, I don't believe, personally, from what I'm seeing, is that we have a strong enough challenge for most of our students that are in our school systems right now in terms of developing that work ethic around their education, which then translate into the workplace. I know that's probably an unpopular statement, but it's the reality that I see.
But a mechanic, he's going to learn the math that's necessary for his trade. Or a plumber's going to learn the math that's necessary for that trade. I mean, if I'm going to read about that because that interests me, you're going to get a kid engaged in it. Okay?
On-the-job training is going to happen no matter what job you have, and the challenge is are we preparing people to be able to learn that information?
Right. But I'm just saying, the math on horticulture, this kid may not care. But if it's a job related to what he wants to do, and I'm just asking that, I think that we've cut back too much on that type of training and giving our kids that option. Because we're measuring kids on their college readiness, and be honest, a lot of kids aren't going to go to college. They have no ambition to go to college. So how are you grading teachers and grading kids on something that they may never do?
I agree with you 100%.
Thank you.
Great, we appreciate everybody's testimony, very helpful. Oh, hold on. Sorry.
Is it too early to gauge your success in this program? And have there been?
For me, it would be too early to gauge the success in the program. We have 1 year of state assessment data to look at. The commissioner himself said we should consider that a new benchmark. So I think it is a little bit too early to gauge our success. I think we all have battle stories and we all have success stories right now. So given that, it would be hard for me to say whether or not it's working. As a mother, I can tell you that, you know, I feel like compared to first grade, my second grader is demonstrating competencies in reading and math that I've seen exponential growth in her. Is that a result of Common Core? Is it a result of a great teacher? Probably a combination, I think. So I think it's a little bit too early to talk.
Great, thank you very much.